Welcome to the Reconnection Club podcast, the show that helps parents heal troubled relationships with their adult sons and daughters. I'm your host, psychotherapist Tina Gilbertson. Each week, I'll offer you compassion, clarity, and personal development tips designed to help you reconnect, not only with your child, but with yourself. Now let's get started. I regularly work with parents who tell me that someone is influencing their child and encouraging him or her to stay away. They talk about their son's new girlfriend who doesn't talk to her parents, or their daughter's husband who doesn't seem to like them, and they fear that these third parties are the real cause of the estrangement. And not surprisingly, they're very worried and they don't know what to do about it. So that's what I'd like to talk about today, is third-party influence. And first, I need to mention a special kind of third-party influence that we don't address in the Reconnection Club, and it gets only a passing mention in my book. But I do want to acknowledge it before talking about other types of third-party influence. It's called parental alienation. And that is when one parent attempts to alienate a child from the other parent. This is an extremely damaging behavior that some parents engage in, and it unfortunately happens quite often, especially but not exclusively during and after a divorce. If there's any good news about parental alienation, is that it is far more often attempted than successful. If your ex speaks ill of you to your children, it does not mean that they're automatically alienated from you just because of that behavior. Just as if you were on good terms and your ex tried to get your estranged adult child to reconcile with you, your ex would have limited power to get them to do that. The adult child herself usually has her own ideas about the relationship and how much contact she wants to have. Parental alienation tends to succeed best with young children who may have limited experience of the targeted parent. They can develop what used to be called parental alienation syndrome. And this definitely would lead to a complete cutoff with the targeted parent. But out of the hundreds of rejected parents I've spoken to personally over the years about their estrangements from adult children, I've seen 2 cases where those estrangements were clearly the result of successful parental alienation, where the child was successfully turned against the parent by the other parent. So even if your child is bombarded by alienation attempts by their other parent, and even though they're estranged from you now, it does not necessarily mean that parental alienation is the cause of your estrangement. But if you suspect that your adult child's estrangement is entirely due to parental alienation, I'll put some links to resources in the show notes. Again, that's not something that I work with, but there are other people who do. So I encourage you to look for resources specifically about parental alienation. Now let's talk about the influence of spouses and friends and partners in your child's life. How responsible are they for your child's estrangement? How much control do they have in this dreadful state of affairs? If your child's spouse has total control over whether she contacts you, then I am very much afraid there are bigger problems there than just estrangement from parents or family. Because that kind of control really only exists in relationships that are abusive in nature. If your child was not exposed to abuse when he or she was growing up, it's not likely they would tolerate it in a relationship as an adult. So let's assume, and let's hope and pray, that your child is not under the complete control of an abusive partner. Of course, even in the absence of abuse, partners do have influence, just as your partner and your friends and maybe your siblings have some influence on your thinking and your behavior, so do those people in your child's life. The question is, who is actually pulling the strings in your child's estrangement? I've lost count of how many times parents have told me things like, "My son sent us an email, but it didn't sound like him. We think his wife must have written it." Or, "We think my daughter's boyfriend is replying to our texts on her phone." When your child writes something that seems like it's not in their own voice, they may indeed have gotten help with the writing, but in the vast majority of cases, the message is theirs. Unless they're being held captive or in a cult, and then, as I said, there are bigger problems at hand. Assume your child's words are spoken from the heart, even if you don't recognize the language. In the Reconnection Club, members work on letters to their adult children, and they often seek help from the community in wording those messages. No doubt some of the adult children on the receiving end are equally suspicious, thinking, "This doesn't sound like my mom. Maybe someone else told her what to write." If I have helped you with a letter in the past, I know you'll agree that you meant every single word you ended up sending to your child. Why not assume that he meant what he said in his letter to you, even if he did get help? The thing to understand about third-party influence is that it usually acts to support and facilitate, but not necessarily create, estrangement. And remember, too, that estrangement can both occur and stay in place without any facilitation or support from others. It's obviously more pleasant to think that your child is surrounded by people who want her to reconcile with you than by people who think she should keep her distance. The first scenario is comforting, and the second is sort of terrifying. Apart from remaining on as good terms as you can with the third party you're concerned about, your to-do list remains the same as if there was no one else involved. Repair the relationship with your child. Focus on your adult child and what she might need from you. Ignore negative influence as best you can, and never contribute to a negative atmosphere by responding to hostility or rudeness with the same. I know it's very hard to feel ganged up on, and it might be extremely difficult to remember right now that as a parent, you have inherent power in the eyes of your children. If it takes a village to resist you, you must be very powerful. So concentrate not on the things that you can't control, such as what others think or say or do, but on what you can control. Attend to your own emotional healing so that you can be the strongest, best version of yourself while you deal with this passage in your life. Then, learn as much as you can about why adult children estrange themselves from parents. With your own healing in place and good information in your pocket, your influence will be more than a match for anyone else's when it comes to your child. For much more on how to figure out what needs mending, please see my book, Reconnecting with Your Estranged Adult Child. Until next time, remember that you are a loving, lovable, and still growing human being. So please take good care of yourself. Bye for now. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Reconnection Club podcast, I invite you to check out reconnectionclub.com. The Reconnection Club is for parents at any stage of estrangement from their adult, child, or children. So whether you've just realized there's trouble between you, you've been living with estrangement for years, or you're newly reconciled but still walking on eggshells, the Reconnection Club is your essential resource for information, support, and continued personal growth. With our courses and workshops, expert interviews, monthly Q&A calls, and a friendly, active community, the Reconnection Club is a wonderful place to be for anyone suffering the pain of estrangement from an adult, child, or children. So check it out at reconnectionclub.com.